potentially when or if mass adopted, what kind of implications will prediction markets have on the society?
Yeah, so I think one of the primary benefits of prediction markets right now is the fact that it actually has the potential to contribute to the extensibility and scalability of kind of blockchain as a whole, because it's kind of a built-in gamification, a built-in speculation program. So if you think of what reasons people are incentivized to get involved in markets, then this idea of staking into potentially winning something, which is essentially what prediction markets are, that number one involves more people into the space who are kind of not as driven as me or some people who are kind of in the DAO space by these abstract philosophical ideas, but instead are driven by I want to have an impact by my voice being heard in this very tangible way of getting things right and getting rewarded for them. And I think that's incredibly powerful in terms of just showing the power of blockchain and the fact that these kind of immutable records and collective intelligence themes can be linked together, and specifically in terms of how prediction markets can apply to governance. It's like you can harness that power that I mentioned to actually set standards or practices within legal organizations such as DAOs, based on what either the success of people at predicting what's going to happen, because that can be a marker of expertise that can mark them as a validator or a person of impact in the system, if you want to have a system based on that, or also a way to say the data that we're collecting, the decisions that we're making are actually in line with what people think is going to happen, so it can kind of be a self-regulating mechanism, and many other directions that it can go, but I think you get the idea. So, yeah.
That was an amazing answer. Honestly, another thing you mentioned governance. There's this concept of futarchy that I'm sure you're aware of, which is using prediction markets to make correct decisions within communities of different sizes. Do you think, as you work with DAOs as well, do you think this futarchy, which is already implemented as a governance mechanism in Amoveo, do you think it can work as a governance mechanism, as an effective governance mechanism in DAOs?
Yeah, well, definitely, because that's kind of what I was referring to with this, the ability of tapping into the wisdom of the crowds in terms of, you mentioned what is the correct decision for a group, and I think, there's kind of two ways of defining correct right there. Either what is the one that is the most likely to create a good outcome for people, or what is the one that people want the most. And I think prediction markets are a way of linking those two answers to say that, if you think of futurarchy as a liquid democracy system driven by values being put into practice, then people making predictions, especially where it can get really meta about internal predictions about what will other people do, kind of accessing theory of mind of the group and making sure that the rules that are getting put into place and the authority system that is emergent from the group is actually, continually calibrated for the values that everyone wants to share. And, I mentioned, just a second when we were talking about this before, this quote from Adrienne Marie Brown, the author of Emergent Strategy, that I think, can draw from kind of activist circles and be used and implemented in DAOs, on-chain in this powerful way where, principles are the foundation of protocols are the foundation of processes that become praxis, and I think futurarchy is the enabler of that.
And just the last question, we've had some centralized prediction markets they've existed, but they were banned by their respective governments of different countries.
Yeah.
What do you think that is? Are governments kind of scared or wary of prediction markets, and why?
Well, I would say that actually, capitalism runs on prediction markets and governments run on prediction markets. traditional voting in democracies is in some sense a prediction market, because similarly to how the market works in Augur, like you have an option to say, like, how likely are my values, the representation that I want by the government, actually going to happen if this one person is elected. And if you think of traditional elections as being kind of this group of individuals all hoping that this one individual, and basically betting on the fact that this one individual or this party of individuals will represent them in the way they want. And similarly, the stock market is a prediction market that's the foundation for modern economies. So I would actually say, like, the government should be the government, I don't know, whatever government, all of them should be recognizing these kind of emergent patterns and realizing kind of the abstraction of the structures that run them, and create more lenient regulatory frameworks that enable blockchain and enable like collective intelligence at scale.
I think that comparison with the election process was just amazing, and thank you very much for this conversation. It was a pleasure.